Hey, this is Chugg, and in this video we're going to be looking at the fundamental movement mechanics of Slash the Slide. Now, I've gone over this topic before in my very first video, but that was more than a year and hundreds of hours of Slash experience ago. So I think it's about time to share some of that knowledge I've gained in that time on this particular topic. So, to begin with, we'll start with the first movement mechanic, which is crouch timing and its effect on slide duration. So if I were to hit the crouch key, so ignoring any mouse movements, so I'm not doing any mouse movements or any sideways strafe keys inputs, just hit the crouch key at the apex of the jump and just see what happens. I start the slide, but it runs out basically immediately. If I were to delay my crouch press to about 75% of the way through the jump, that was actually pretty reasonable. That was about 1.2, maybe even 1.3 seconds. But if I were to delay the crouch press to just before I land, I can extend the slide duration to 1.5 seconds, approximately. Now this is the bedrock of your Slash mechanics. This has to be really reliable, really strong, because every time you jump, you need to hit the crouch key at the right moment in order to continue to slide. Otherwise, you're just going to, if you fail the crouch timing, if you press it too late, you're just left there on the ground in just an exposed position, or like maybe you were racing to some position and now you can't get there. If you do it too early, you may try to continue the slide a little bit longer than you should, and the slide will just run out. So for example, like that, maybe I wanted to get around this corner and up to that TP, but the slide ran out here, and then would I have to just walk here, then jump again? It's just really clunky. So having this super consistent should be your first priority when it comes to building yourself into the proper Slash player that you want to be. The other interaction I want to talk about is what happens when you're jumping and landing on different elevations. So let's say I'm here and I hit the jump key and hit the crouch key. How long will this slide last? And it turns out that it's longer than just the normal slide. So I landed at about 42, and it lasted about 2 seconds. So an extra 0.5 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but that elevation wasn't that high. Let's try from here. Let's try to experiment in the same area, and we can see that that was also, was longer still. Let's come up here, see how long this slide will go. And keep note, I'm not trying to build speed in these, so I'm not traveling very far, but if I'm on the ground sliding, that's an opportunity to be accelerating. Alright. See how long? This is about 4.5, maybe even 5 seconds. So you can get some serious slides. So it's really important that when you're practicing these slides, that you run them out as long as you can. You really get comfortable with riding riding them to the end, so that you can learn when to hit the jump key to end the slide to keep your momentum at the right moment. So let's say just here, and I just I used that whole slide duration, and I didn't run out. My slide didn't run out. I hit the jump key. I continue my momentum and navigate the map in a quick way. So that's the first movement mechanic, crouch timing, and what that means for your slide duration. The second movement mechanic is, once you're sliding, how do you accelerate? Like, how do you gain speed? And this comes from what I call the conditions for acceleration. And as far as I'm aware, there are 3. That is your strafe key inputs, your mouse position, your crosshair position, and your mouse behavior, which is how fast and how you're moving the mouse and how fast you're moving it. So an important point to address is when Slash lands with her crouch engaged, she has 16 different options to choose from. This is, she can choose 4 singular strafe directions. She could choose between 4 combinations of strafe directions. She can do all of those moving the mouse to the left. She could do all of these moving the mouse to the right. Each of these are different and unique and have their own characteristics. Some of them vary only slightly, but others are vastly different. I made a whole video about these called Chugg Advanced Sliding. You can search it on YouTube. I think it's sliding mechanics, sliding techniques, or whatever. But if you want more information on those, go ahead. But that's not for you to learn about now. We want to control for this variable and only consider 2 of the slides. That is forward and right, or forward and left. Like, this is I count this as one slide because it's forward and right, move the mouse to the right, or forward and left, move the mouse to the left. This is one slide. It's just a reflection depending on which way you want to go. The other slide I want to talk about is ignoring, you take away the forward movement direction and you only use right or only use left, moving your mouse with the strafe direction. Okay, so the first slide, I call it the fundamental basic slide, or just the basic slide, looks like this, and the second slide, which is side only, looks like this. Now these slides are substantially different. The second one, preferred by some people, I think some people hold this as the top one. I personally don't feel that way. The characteristics of it that make it different are if my momentum is forward and I want to change my momentum to go that direction, using side only will make that transition much quicker. I'll take up less space and it will be done under less time for me to change my momentum fully from forward to fully to the right. The acceleration feels faster. This is a combination of two things. It's mouse position, I'll get into that after, as well as like the sort of the view distortion as you move across like this. This is just naturally you can see that it appears faster just because of how the screen, the view on the screen distortion is changing at a different speed. But yeah, the acceleration is faster in a very particular sense. To come back, the downside is that, especially if you're a new Slash player learning, whenever you I've got my momentum forward and I want to change it all to the right. When I hit the jump key, I'm not actually looking at where I'm going, as opposed to this, which is pretty much exactly where you're going. So that's why I think this is a preferential choice, especially like I feel that you have more control over it, as well as you get to see where you're going. It's just generally the best place to start. And absolutely, if you want to just switch to side only all of the time, then go ahead. But I'm just telling you what I recommend. Okay, those aside, let's control for those key presses, and now we'll just experiment with mouse movement speed. So the conditions of acceleration. We're focusing on the third one, mouse behavior. So let's just move the mouse slowly and just observe the speedometer. So that was about 510. Let's go a little bit faster. 590, cool. A little bit faster. 630, a little bit faster. 660. Okay, we're sort of starting to get there. 660. You can go faster still, but I think that flash 690. But you're getting to the point where if I move my mouse too fast, I'll sacrifice too much crosshair position. My speed won't accelerate at the optimum rate, and I'll just like crash into walls. So you want to experiment. Like don't just look at my mouse. Sorry, my mouse here and just copy this because my sensitivity is pretty low. Yours is probably pretty high. If I were to increase my sensitivity, like the visual speed that you're tracking here is going to be different. So experiment with the mouse speeds, and you want to aim for like 650. Coming in at a certain angle and try and exit out at 90 degrees, 650. Okay. Now I want to get back to the second condition of acceleration, which is crosshair position. Now, there's a little, I'm not sure if I should call it a function, but if I've come in and I've landed, and I'm going to slide to the right, there's a particular range from approximately here to here. If my crosshair is in this location, my acceleration is reduced. I'm still accelerating, but it's not as strong as when it's beyond this point. And this was most apparent to me spectating a couple of players who would sort of just have this generally slower mouse movement speed, which is fine. I mean, they can build reasonable speed, but they were spending too much time in this particular zone. And this was also explained to me by Smile and Scythe, but I didn't understand it until I'd watched players with their crosshair just in this zone for too long. So something that I developed just naturally through habit, or not habit, through just playing, was to sort of skip out and then play, and then so I'm gonna skip beyond this zone of worse acceleration, and then move my mouse in a way to accelerate. So it was very like this, and you can see 680, like it's a little bit faster. The reason that my speed's getting higher here than it was when I was testing it before was because I'm not just doing a uniform speed. So I'm flicking to a particular position and then I'm using this space better. Because if I have the slower speed like this, oh sorry, a little bit faster than that, I'm getting a little bit bogged down, but I think it's important to sort of express this, okay? So if I have a reasonable speed like that, so I got 640. If I were to, instead, like, the more time I spend my crosshair here, the more physical position on the ground I'm sacrificing before I start to accelerate. So let's say if I start my slide and then I flick here instantly, I've then got all this space to accelerate, as opposed to if I'd gradually put it here, and now I'm in a more forward position and I've got less space to accelerate. That's the general idea, is you want your crosshair placed in the right position. Now, the correct crosshair placement is dependent on what your strafe key inputs are. So, as I mentioned before, when you use side only using the right strafe key, your crosshair actually starts in the correct position. This is why people think that the acceleration for this slide is just better, because you start from the proper position. Another way to see this in action is when you consider the forward-only slide. So I'm just going to do it like this. You can see that the acceleration is no good. I'll move the mouse a little bit faster. You can see like 580. Yeah, it's getting there. Reasonable. But what the trick is that the crosshair position is so far, like the ideal crosshair position is actually like out here. So you want to set your momentum, and I should say, the ideal crosshair position is also dependent on your direction of motion. It's not just key presses, but direction of motion matters. So you want to set your direction of motion forward, and then flick out to the proper position. I'm not 100% sure where it is, because I don't use this slide very much, but you can see I got 700 off of that one slide. And I guarantee that if I told you to do a forward-only slide, you wouldn't get 720 units per second off of one jump. Like, just because of the fact that the crosshair has to be positioned properly in order to engage that acceleration and use the space properly. Alright, so those are the first two and most important movement mechanics of Slash. The third movement mechanic is that once you have enough speed, how do you maintain that speed with consecutive slide jumps? So a big problem that people would have, and actually I'm on the PTS here, and it feels a little bit better than it used to be, but the problem that someone might have is if you, let's say I just build up some high speed, and then I change, like I had 800 units or whatever it was, 850, I come up here and I'm up the stairs and I'm at 650, like I dropped 200 units per second. Is there anything that I can do to keep that speed up, to avoid dropping it? And it comes back to the conditions of acceleration. This is crosshair placement, strafe key inputs, crosshair placement. There's no there's no consistency with my finger gestures. Key presses, crosshair position, and mouse behavior. How fast are you moving your mouse, and how fast are you moving your mouse? The trick that I had to modify my movement when they first introduced this higher level of ground friction, 1.3, back in the March update. I realized that when I would land, I would then go to flick, and I would land, and then I would go, and I would land, and then I would do that. And every time that I would land, I would just drop so much speed because I'd be used to coast slides, which are shallow slides like this, where you're not really curving that much. You're just doing sort of a shallow curve, and you would lose more speed because the ground friction would overpower it. So the trick that I found was to combine the timing of when I start moving the mouse with my crouch input, because I'm obviously crouching before I land. So if I also start moving my mouse at the same time, I'm moving my mouse before I land, so that the frame that I land, my mouse is moving, it's probably in the right position, and I've got my key presses. I'm satisfying the conditions to accelerate. I won't drop any speed, I'll just be accelerating. So that's all I really have to say on the topic. I'll move around for another minute or so, just so that you can, where I'm 100% just focusing on my movement and not on, you know, speaking properly and trying to articulate my points. I hope you have enjoyed this video and find it helpful. Maybe shed some light on something. Shed some light on her movement and how it works. There are okay. Before I go, these three mechanics. This is how her sliding functions in a vacuum, and it doesn't actually consider real life navigating terrain. Like if I'm on Sarnath in this position, what am I like? I have my mechanics in my hand, but how do I use them? And that is another challenge in itself. You want to develop your mechanics so that you are able to respond to the different positions that you're in, and then use them at your discretion. I'm going to I was going to make another video, but let's just chuck this in at the end as a bit of a bonus to those who stuck around. There's a concept. Snaking, zigzagging, this is what other people call it, but I myself call it weaving, because you're weaving in different slides. Like you've landed, you're using one slide, then you're switching to another, and you're trying to positionally navigate around the map. You're just trying to use your slide and navigate around properly. I call it weaving. There are two types of weaving. There's to take terminology from strafe jumping. There's full beat weaving and half beat weaving. I recommend for those people who understand what I mean instantly to develop half beat weaving. It's just much more flexible, much superior for reasons that I'll get into. If I were to land, okay, let's say I want to land this position and I want to get to here to then get up to the TP, right? So this is just like an introduction to navigating terrain. What are my options? I could like curve like this. That's sort of like a full beat weave. Where I land, I curve out, curve back. Like, and this is pretty reasonable. You have to remember, what are the conditions of acceleration? Crosshair positioning. If I land and I'm here, and I've skated off this side, my direction of motion is this way, and I want to switch to forward and left, I have to flick my mouse all the way back out here to engage good acceleration, then flick all the way back here to get good acceleration. If I were to do half beat weaving, where I'm mixing the basic slide and side only, my instinct is to cut side, that's not the proper way. My instinct is to get to this position, and then cut left, and then forward and right this way. And if we notice my crosshair, I've come into this position, and then my crosshair is already in position for side only to be a good acceleration. And then my momentum is this way, is in moving in this direction. I can switch to forward and right, and my crosshair doesn't have to move very far to get to the good acceleration zone. So we'll just do that a little bit cleaner. So just falling. Oh, well, you got to hit the. So this is why you need to get focus on your crouch mechanics. That's what that's for. Like that. And I didn't do that quite as smoothly as I wanted. Let's try to it. Let's try to do it again. Just falling. There we go. And you can see that if you were to compare that to full beat weaving, which I'll try again now, the speedometer value should be more consistently increasing. It's also easier on my crosshair because I'm not weaving like this, and as you can see, as a low sense player, this is really impactful, as opposed to having my crosshair on one side. I'm just doing this. It's also good because you can manage your crosshair better. So if let's say how can I best describe? So here, this is a classic place. If I want to move to this area out here is called A, by the way. I could move like this, and that's okay. But I do like to more like this. I like that better. It's just more calm Like my hand is not moving as frantically. The vision, like I'm cresting the corner like this, and I can already sort of see like the objects aren't being as distorted. There's a smaller flick distance as opposed to coming out here and then whipping like this. Like if I'm coming out here like this. It's not that bad because you can obviously switch to this strafe direction before you come through. But generally half-beat weaving is something that I do. It's actually something I did subconsciously, and then that translated to half-beat strafe jumping. So now I do that all the time now. That was not something. That was something I got through slash movement. All right, so that's weaving, and I wanted to make a whole video on it because I think it's really important. But I'll give it to you as like a, I don't know, Easter egg. I'll just timestamp it or something and refer to it that way if I need to direct someone. Alright, I hope that that's plenty for you to go on. The 3 fundamental mechanics of slash. The crouch timing, to increase the duration of your slide. The conditions of acceleration and how to actually gain speed when you're sliding. And then the means to keep your speed in subsequent strafe jumps to avoid it hitching back down, which is to satisfy the conditions of acceleration just before you land. The way it helped me was to tie my mouse movement to the crouch key. There we go. There's the too long didn't watch. Alright, I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you later.